Picture this. You've spent your entire life being told that homeownership is the ultimate sign of financial success. Meanwhile, you know someone with a $10 million net worth who could buy any house they want in cash tomorrow, yet they're paying $8,000 a month in rent. Are they crazy? Or do they know something you don't? What if I told you that millionaires worth $50 million are deliberately choosing to rent while everyone else is scrambling to pay off their mortgage before retirement? Here's what's shocking. I've seen this pattern over and over with my wealthiest clients. People in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s with serious money are deliberately choosing not to own their primary residence. Not because they can't afford it, but because they understand something about wealth, freedom, and financial control that most Americans never learn. I'm about to reveal 5 counterintuitive reasons why this strategy could be the difference between a comfortable retirement and true financial freedom. And the 5th reason? It's a mathematical reality that will completely flip everything you've been taught about real estate after 50. Hit subscribe and comment, Wealthy Renter, if you're ready to discover why the smartest money moves often feel completely backwards. Thank you so much, and the math behind this decision will shock you. Reason 1. Opportunity cost, mathematics. Here's the mathematical reality that makes every numbers-driven millionaire stop in their tracks. The opportunity cost of tying up capital in real estate after 50. This isn't about emotions or preferences. This is pure mathematics, and the math doesn't lie. When you're 52 and considering buying an $800,000 house, you're not just buying a home, you're making a massive investment decision that could cost you hundreds of thousands in lost opportunity. But that's just the surface. What's behind it will startle people. Let me tell you about 2 ancient treasure keepers who served neighboring kingdoms, both entrusted with managing vast amounts of royal gold. Each kingdom possessed identical treasures, exactly 200 gold talents, and both treasurers were tasked with preserving and growing this wealth for their aging monarchs who would need the resources in their final years. The first treasure keeper was a traditionalist who believed in the absolute security of physical possession. Gold must be protected above all else, he declared, constructing an elaborate underground vault with the finest locks and thickest walls. He stored all 200 talents in this magnificent fortress, taking great pride in knowing exactly where every piece of gold resided. The vault was impenetrable, the gold was safe, and he slept peacefully, knowing that not a single coin could be stolen or lost. The second treasure keeper took a radically different approach that seemed almost reckless to observers. Instead of building vaults, he kept only 50 talents in reserve for immediate needs and sent the remaining 150 talents out into the world with trusted merchants and traders. Gold sitting in darkness serves no one, he reasoned, but gold in motion creates more gold. This controversial strategy generated constant income. The trading ventures returned 7% annually, roughly 10.5 talents per year. The treasure keeper reinvested these profits, sending even more gold out to work. Meanwhile, his neighbor's vault remained exactly the same size year after year, containing precisely the same 200 talents, earning nothing. After 13 years, the span between a monarch's 52nd and 65th birthday, the results were staggering. The first treasure keeper still possessed his original 200 talents, unchanged and safe. The second treasure keeper now controlled over 340 talents. His willingness to put gold to work had created an additional 140 talents of wealth, enough to fund an entire additional decade of royal lifestyle. When both kingdoms faced the expenses of their aging rulers, medical care, comfortable living, and eventually inheritance for their heirs, the difference became critical. The first kingdom had to carefully ration their fixed 200 talents. The second kingdom had abundant resources and ongoing income from their still working gold. Here's what that story reveals about real estate decisions after 50. When you tie up $200,000 in a down payment, you're choosing the first treasure keeper's strategy: security over growth. That $200,000 invested in a diversified portfolio averaging 7% returns grows to over $540,000 by age 65. That's $340,000 in wealth creation just by keeping your money working instead of locking it in walls and foundation. Wait, the most important part is in the following story. Even if you account for rent increases averaging 3% annually, you still come out significantly ahead with far more liquidity, flexibility, and less risk. Real estate typically appreciates 3 to 4% annually long-term, but that's before taxes, repairs, maintenance, and interest. Meanwhile, your diversified portfolio generates both income and appreciation. Here's where most people over 50 make their biggest financial mistake. They think their home needs to be their biggest investment, when after 50, it shouldn't be. Your biggest investment should be liquid, diversified assets that can be easily accessed or repositioned as your needs change. This next principle explains why the wealthy think so differently about what they leave behind. Reason 2. Estate planning simplified. Here's one of the smartest and least talked about reasons millionaires rent after 50. Estate planning becomes dramatically simpler. When you pass away and your wealth is tied up in real estate, you don't just leave your heirs a house, you leave them a project filled with complications, decisions, and potential family conflicts that can destroy relationships and drain the very wealth you worked so hard to create. Here's where most people over 50 make their biggest financial mistake without even realizing it. Let me tell you about two master craftsmen who spent their entire lives building extraordinary legacies for their families. Both men were equally skilled, equally successful, and equally devoted to leaving something meaningful for their children. But their approaches to preserving their life's work revealed profound differences in wisdom about inheritance and family harmony. The first master craftsman was a builder who took immense pride in creating tangible, impressive legacies. Over decades, he constructed an elaborate workshop complex, multiple buildings housing specialized tools, rare materials, and intricate machinery he designed himself. Each structure served a specific purpose, one for metalworking, another for woodcraft, a third for his revolutionary techniques that had made him famous throughout the region. When the master craftsman passed away, he left his 3 children this magnificent workshop complex. On the surface, it seemed like an incredible inheritance, valuable property, specialized equipment, and a thriving business. But reality proved far more complicated than anyone anticipated. The inheritance immediately created problems none of the children had foreseen. The eldest son lived across the country and had no interest in relocating to manage the workshop. The daughter was a teacher who knew nothing about the craft and felt overwhelmed by the technical complexity. The youngest son wanted to continue the business but couldn't afford to buy out his siblings' shares. Legal battles ensued over valuations. Should they sell the entire complex? Who would manage it during the lengthy selling process? How do you divide specialized, immovable equipment between 3 people? The workshop required constant maintenance, insurance, and property taxes that drained money while the siblings argued. 2 years of legal fees and family disputes later, they finally sold the complex for far less than its peak value, and the relationships between the siblings never fully recovered. Meanwhile, the second master craftsman chose a completely different approach to his legacy. This craftsman was equally successful, but understood something profound about inheritance. Instead of leaving behind the physical workshop, he gradually liquidated his business assets and converted everything into carefully managed investment portfolios. When this craftsman passed away, he left each of his 3 children precisely equal shares of a diversified investment portfolio that generated steady income. No complicated property to manage, no specialized knowledge required, no forced partnerships between siblings with different interests and capabilities. Each child could immediately access their inheritance, manage it through professional advisors, and make independent decisions about their financial future. One son used his portion to fund his children's education. The daughter invested for retirement security. The youngest started his own business in a completely different field. Most importantly, the family remained close because money had brought them together rather than driving them apart. Here's what that story reveals about real estate inheritance. When you leave your children real estate, you're forcing them into a partnership they never chose, requiring skills they may not possess, and creating decisions that can tear families apart. This next principle explains why the wealthy think so differently about the true costs everyone else ignores. Would you rather inherit $1 million house that requires maintenance, insurance, and difficult decisions, or inherit $1 million portfolio that generates $40,000 to $50,000 annually in income with no complications? All of the above becomes meaningless if you miss this detail about the hidden expenses that multiply after 50. Reason 3. True cost explosion. Now let's talk about something most people never calculate honestly: the real cost of owning a home after 50. This is where the brutal truth hits hardest, because once you're past a certain age, home ownership becomes exponentially more expensive, more unpredictable, and more stressful than most people remember from their younger years. This next principle explains why the wealthy think so differently about the true costs everyone else ignores. There once lived two kings who ruled neighboring kingdoms of equal prosperity. Both monarchs needed magnificent castles befitting their status, but they chose completely different approaches that would reveal everything about the hidden costs of ownership versus the wisdom of strategic arrangements. The first king was a traditionalist who believed that true sovereignty required owning everything outright. A king must possess his castle completely, he declared, commissioning architects to build an elaborate fortress with soaring towers, grand halls, and intricate details that would last for centuries. The construction was magnificent, and the king took enormous pride in knowing that every stone, every timber, every decorative element belonged entirely to him. But as years passed, the king discovered that ownership brought unexpected burdens. The massive castle required constant maintenance that seemed to grow more expensive with each passing season. The roof developed leaks that cost 15,000 gold pieces to repair. The ancient heating system failed during winter, requiring 20,000 gold pieces for replacement. Stone foundations shifted, requiring structural engineers and another 25,000 gold pieces in repairs. Property taxes increased annually as the kingdom's assessors valued the improvements. Insurance costs climbed as the castle aged and became more vulnerable to damage. The king found himself constantly managing contractors, negotiating with craftsmen, and dealing with surprise expenses that arrived at the worst possible times. What had seemed like a one-time investment had become an endless drain on the royal treasury. Most frustrating of all, the king's wealth was trapped within those castle walls. When opportunities arose to invest in profitable trade ventures or acquire valuable territories, the king's capital was locked in stone and mortar, earning nothing while his neighbors prospered from more liquid investments. The second king chose a different path that initially seemed less prestigious. Instead of building, he negotiated a long-term arrangement with a wealthy merchant who owned several magnificent properties throughout the region. For a fixed monthly payment of 3,000 gold pieces, the king could occupy any of these castles, with all maintenance, repairs, taxes, and improvements handled entirely by the merchant owner. This arrangement gave the king something invaluable: predictability and liquidity. Every month, he knew exactly what his housing would cost. No surprise roof repairs, no unexpected foundation problems, no climbing property taxes eating into his retirement plans. When the grand staircase needed renovation, the merchant handled it. When storms damaged the towers, repairs happened without touching the king's treasury. Most importantly, the king kept his vast wealth liquid and working. Instead of having millions locked in castle walls, His gold remained available for profitable investments, emergency needs, and opportunities that arose throughout his reign. When neighboring territories became available for acquisition, he had the resources. When his advisors needed immediate funding for defense, the money was there. After 20 years, the contrast was stark. The first king's castle was certainly impressive, but he had spent over 400,000 gold pieces on maintenance, taxes, and repairs, while his capital remained frozen in real estate. The second king had paid 720,000 gold pieces in housing fees but had generated over 1.2 million in returns from keeping his capital invested and liquid. Here's what that story reveals about homeownership after 50. When you're in your prime earning years, you can handle surprise $25,000 roof replacements. But when you're retired on a fixed income, these expenses become devastating financial shocks that can derail years of careful retirement planning. Wait, the most important part is in the following story about why cash flow beats everything else. Reason 4. Liquidity becomes everything. Here's what changes after 50 that most people don't consider. Your relationship with liquidity becomes everything. When you're 30, tying up $500,000 in a house feels smart because you've got 35 years to let it appreciate. But when you're 50 or 60, that same $500,000 locked in real estate could be costing you millions in opportunity and, more importantly, could leave you powerless when life demands immediate action. Wait, the most important part is in the following story about why cash flow beats everything else. In a prosperous trading region, there lived two equally successful merchants who had both accumulated vast wealth through decades of careful business. As they approached their later years, both men faced the same question: how to store and manage their riches to ensure security and access when needed. Their different approaches would reveal everything about the true nature of financial power. The first merchant was obsessed with permanence and security. He converted his wealth into a magnificent frozen lake on his property, a spectacular sight that impressed every visitor. This frozen water represented millions in value, crystal clear and beautifully preserved, locked solid and seemingly eternal. "Look at my wealth," he would proudly tell visitors, pointing to the enormous expanse of ice that sparkled in the sunlight. "It cannot flow away, cannot be stolen easily, and will last for generations." The merchant took great comfort in being able to see his wealth, touch it, and know exactly where every bit of it resided. The frozen lake was certainly impressive, representing years of hard work and careful accumulation. Neighbors admired its size and permanence, and the merchant felt secure, knowing his fortune was captured in this solid, tangible form. The second merchant chose a different approach that seemed almost careless to those who didn't understand his strategy. Instead of freezing his wealth, he maintained it as a flowing river system with multiple channels and tributaries. The water moved constantly, generating power through carefully placed mills and irrigation systems. This flowing wealth wasn't as visually impressive as the frozen lake, but it was always moving, always working, always accessible. Then came the crisis that changed everything. Both merchants received urgent news. Their aging parents, living in a distant city, required immediate and expensive medical care. A renowned specialist was available, but only if they could pay substantial fees within days. Additionally, the merchants themselves needed to relocate quickly to provide personal care and support. The merchant with the frozen lake faced a devastating reality. His wealth, while substantial, was completely inaccessible when he needed it most. To access any portion of his frozen assets, he would need to wait for natural thawing or undertake expensive, time-consuming processes to break through the ice. Even then, he could only access small portions at a time. While his parents waited for help, he spent precious weeks trying to convert his frozen wealth into usable resources. Meanwhile, the merchant with the flowing river simply redirected several channels. Within hours, he had the funds needed for medical care. Within days, he had relocated his entire operation, maintaining his income while being present for his family's crisis. His liquid wealth allowed him to respond immediately to life's urgent demands while continuing to generate income throughout the emergency. Here's what that story reveals about your financial strategy after 50. When Robert's father had a stroke and needed specialized care in Denver, Robert had options because his money wasn't locked up in real estate. He could help financially immediately, relocate if needed, and maintain his lifestyle throughout the crisis. This next principle explains why the wealthy think so differently about being tied down versus having unlimited options. Liquidity isn't just a financial advantage. It's a life advantage that becomes more critical with each passing year. All of the above becomes meaningless if you miss this detail about the ultimate luxury that money can buy. Reason 5. The flexibility premium. After 50, life becomes unpredictable in ways you simply can't anticipate when you're younger. Health issues might require you to move closer to specialized medical care. Aging parents might need you nearby. Your interests might completely shift. Maybe you want to spend winters in Florida and summers in Colorado. The ability to move quickly, to say yes to opportunity and no to hassle, has real value. I call it the flexibility premium. All of the above becomes meaningless if you miss this detail about the ultimate luxury that money can buy. In the golden age of maritime trade, there lived two equally successful sea captains who had both amassed great fortunes through decades of navigating treacherous waters and profitable trade routes. Both men owned magnificent vessels and commanded respect throughout the trading ports. But their approaches to securing their ships revealed profound differences in understanding freedom versus security. The first captain was obsessed with permanence and stability. After years of successful voyages, he decided to anchor his ship permanently in the most prestigious harbor of the most prosperous city he'd ever visited. He drove massive iron anchors deep into the seabed, wrapped his vessel in heavy chains, and connected it to the shore with elaborate docking systems that would take months to dismantle. "Look at my security," he would proudly tell other captains. "My ship will never drift, never be stolen, never be lost to storms. I have found the perfect harbor, and here I shall remain." The harbor was indeed magnificent. Crystal clear waters, perfect weather, excellent amenities, and impressive neighbors. The captain's ship became a landmark that impressed every visitor who sailed into port. The second captain chose a completely different strategy that seemed almost reckless to those who valued security above all else. He kept his ship lightly anchored, always ready to raise sail within hours. His vessel remained equipped for immediate departure. His crew stayed trained and prepared, and his supplies were always stocked for unexpected journeys. "The seas are vast and full of opportunity," he would explain. "Why would I chain myself to one harbor, no matter how beautiful, when the world offers countless possibilities?" This captain's ship appeared less permanently impressive than his neighbors, but it possessed something far more valuable: unlimited options. Then came the developments that changed everything. The anchored captain received word that his daughter, living in a distant port, had given birth to twins and needed family support. Simultaneously, he learned that his aging father in another city required immediate care after a serious illness. Most unexpectedly, he discovered an incredible business opportunity in a remote but lucrative trading region that was only accessible for a brief seasonal window. The anchored captain faced an agonizing reality. His ship, while magnificent and secure, was completely immobilized. Removing the anchors, chains, and docking systems would take months of expensive work. Even then, his permanently moored vessel had lost much of its seaworthiness during years of stationary harbor life. His pursuit of security had transformed his ship from a vehicle of opportunity into a beautiful prison. Meanwhile, the flexible captain simply raised his sails. Within a day, he was heading toward his daughter's port to help with the new grandchildren. After a month of family time, he sailed to care for his father. When the seasonal trade opportunity arose, he was perfectly positioned to capitalize on it. His commitment to maintaining options had given him something the anchored captain had lost: the ability to respond immediately to life's most important demands. Here's what that story reveals about real estate decisions after 50. When Denise wanted to move from Denver to Seattle to be near her grandchildren, she gave 30 days notice and was there for every important moment. If she had owned, selling would have meant 6 months of uncertainty, $40,000 in fees, and missing precious family time that can never be recovered. The flexibility to move quickly isn't just convenient, it's the ultimate luxury that money can buy. There you have it, 5 powerful reasons why millionaires choose renting over buying after 50. From opportunity cost mathematics that can create hundreds of thousands in additional wealth, to estate planning that leaves money instead of problems, to true cost explosions that drain retirement savings, to liquidity that provides life-changing options, to flexibility that becomes the ultimate luxury. Here's what this really comes down to. After 50, your relationship with money needs to change. It's not about accumulating impressive assets anymore. It's about optimizing for freedom, financial control, and peace of mind. Your homework this week: calculate the real numbers for your situation. Add up mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and opportunity cost. Compare that to renting plus investing the difference. You might be shocked at what you discover. What's your biggest takeaway from these 5 strategies? Drop a comment with your age and which reason surprised you most. If this video opened your eyes to a completely different way of thinking about wealth after 50, hit subscribe and share it with someone facing this exact decision. Remember, true wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you control.